Hey, what's up guys? This video is for section 1-1, which is variables and expressions. So we are going to start looking at what is a variable and how we use that in algebra. And also some variables or some numbers, they also have an exponent. So we are going to look at those exponents, and when you put variables and numbers together, then we are going to make an expression. So let's go ahead and look at some terms that you guys need to know, and we're going to start with variable. So a variable is any letter to represent an unknown value, which means it varies. And that's why we say variable, because it varies. The word varies means it changes every time. That number or a specific number can change every time you guys use a variable. So some letters to represent a variable are X, Y, Z, A, D, M. Any letter in the alphabet, you can use it as a variable. The most common ones in algebra are X, Y, and Z. So you guys heard those before. So that is a variable. Now, we are going to use variables to represent an unknown number. So that's going to be our job, to find those numbers and also to represent an expression. Now, an exponent, it indicates the number of times you multiply the base by itself. So just a review for you guys. A base is the number here with the exponents. So this number is the number you are going to multiply this many times by itself, which is called the exponent. So in this case, 2 to the third power, and that's what we say. We don't say 3 exponent. The word power means exponent, so third power, 3. If you guys have an exponent of 2, so imagine this is a 2, you have a second power. Another name we can use is squared for 2, second power, or cube for 3. So this 2 to the third power, you can also say 2 cubed. So cube means 3. So the way you guys find the answer when you guys have an exponent, well, 2 to the third power, that's going to equal 2 times 2 times 2. Notice I wrote down the number 2, the base, which is this number, 3 times, and I multiply it by itself. 2 times 2 times 2. So I'm just going to show you the answer here. I'm going to multiply these 2 here. 2 times 2, that's 4. I bring down the 2, and 4 times 2 is 8. So 2 to the third power equals 8. Or you can say 2 cubed equals 8. If you guys have 2 squared, that means you have 2 to the second power. And I'm just going to write that down for you to give you more examples. So if you have 2 squared, that means you multiply the base, which is this number here. And this base can be any number. It can be a 3, a 7, a 10. But the exponent tells you how many times you multiply that base by itself. So 2 times 2, in this case, is 4. So 2 squared equals 4, or 2 to the second power equals 4. Something else you also have to know is when you guys do not see an exponent with a base or a number. So I'm going to give you a different number here. I'm going to use the number 3 here. And if you guys don't see an exponent, so here, right there, that's actually an invisible 1. Any number that you do not have an exponent, like a 2, a 3, exponent of 4 here, or exponent of 5, is an invisible 1. So mathematically, that 3 has an exponent of 1, and 3 to the first power is just 3, because you are going to write the 3 one time. So 3 to the first is just 3. Or you can have any number. Let me just choose another number, 7. 7 is to the first power because it is an invisible 1, and 7 to the first power is just 7. But once you guys have a different exponent, like a 2, a 3, or a 4, or any other exponent, that's how many times you're going to multiply the number by itself. Now, this is very important to know this algebraic expression term, because we are going to use a lot of expressions in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, and you also see those in more math classes, geometry, pre-calculus, and calculus, and so forth. But an algebraic expression, it is composed of numbers, variables, exponents, and math operations. So you guys see on the screen here, I have an expression, 5x squared plus 2y plus 9xy plus 4. First of all, it is an expression because we have variables. You guys see the x, the y, x, y. We have exponents. You guys see the squared here. And you also have variables with some exponents that you guys do not see, so they're invisible. So the ones I'm looking at is this one here, the y. You cannot see an exponent. The x here, you cannot see an exponent here on top of the x, and the y, you don't see an exponent. So remember, just like on the previous slide, I showed you that when a number doesn't have an exponent, it actually has an invisible 1 exponent. So those variables, they do have an exponent. That y has an exponent of 1, that x over here has an exponent of 1, and the y has an exponent of 1. So every time you guys see those variables with no exponents, remember, it does have an exponent, which is an invisible 1. Or numbers like this one here, the 4, it has an exponent of 1 as well. It is an invisible 1. And an algebraic expression does not have an equal sign. So notice this expression here, I don't have an equal sign. So it's not an equation. When we are going to look at equations later on, but this expression is not an equation because there's no equal sign. We also have some terms, and the terms are the ones, the numbers that are together with variables and exponents. So this number 5 here is together with the x squared. So this is called one term, 5x squared. The next one, plus 2y, that's the second term. So all of this here is a 2y because it has a number and a variable. The third term is this one, 9xy. And the fourth term is just a number, no variable, 4. That's also a term. Now those terms, they have a specific name. So if you look at the actual number with no x, that's called a constant. So every time you guys hear me say constant, I'm referring to the number with no variable, just a number by itself. Also, the terms, they have what is called a coefficient. So the number in front of the variable, so in this case the 9 is in front of the x, that's called a coefficient. The 2 in front of the y is called a coefficient. So this one is coefficient of 2. This one here is in front of the x squared, and it is a coefficient. 5 is a coefficient. So an expression has terms, it has exponents, it has variables. It might have a constant. Sometimes it doesn't have a constant, but in this case it has one. And we also have different names for the number of terms. Now this number of terms is just an introduction to show you the names of those terms, but we're not going to use those so much in this lesson, but in future chapters we are going to use the following names. So here, one term, 5x squared, that's the first term. So you notice here we have monomial. Mono means 1. So when you guys have only one term, we can say it's a binomial. If you put two terms together, it's called a binomial. So two terms together. So notice I have the 5x squared plus I'm adding a second term, 5x squared plus 2y. So that is called a binomial. Bi means 2. So we have two terms. If you guys have three terms right here, so we have 5x squared plus 2y plus 9xy. So this is the third term, three terms. That's called a trinomial. So all of this right here is a trinomial. Tri means 3. We also have four terms, quad. Quad means 4, so quadrinomial. And usually after that, 5 terms, 6 terms, we should say polynomial. And poly means many. So we do have many terms. But like I said, guys, the names for now, we're not going to use those a lot, but it is a very good introduction since we do have expressions to give them names. So the thing is that you have to know is how to look for the different coefficients, different terms, constants, and the exponents of the variables. And you have to know that just looking at an algebraic expression. Now, the concept for this video is to how to translate an expression into a sentence, which is a verbal expression. So from an algebraic expression, algebraic is when you guys have the exponents, variables, and those different terms, into a verbal expression, which is just a sentence. So that's where you need to know what do some keywords mean in mathematics. So on the screen, you guys see 4 different operations in math. So we do have the addition, we have subtraction, we have multiplication, and we have division. So all of these words, let's just look at addition here. All of these words here, they mean that you are going to add a number or a variable. All of these words mean subtraction, all of these words multiplication, and all of these words means division. And it's a very good idea to pause the video so you guys can look at the words and understand what the words mean in algebra. Now, when you guys look at those asterisks, I do have some words or terms here: more than, with the red asterisk, subtracted from, less than, and divided into. All of those, guys, when you see that term or that expression, subtracted from, less than, more than, that means that you are going to change the order of the expression is written. So I do have a little asterisk down here. Remember, the words from, then, and into will change the order of how you guys write the actual expression. So the word then, notice from, then, or into. And I'll show you guys with an example what that means. But just keep in mind that those words, then, from, and into, will change the order. Everything else, you're just going to make sense of the problem, first of all, and then you just write down the sentence that will make sense to the algebraic expression. Now this is where we actually are going, guys. I'm going to give you an algebraic expression, and you need to give me a sentence that represents that expression. So I have some phrases that are going to help you guys when you try to change an algebraic expression to a verbal expression. You try to translate. Just like any language, you translate from one language to another one, from English to Spanish. You have to change the words and you have to make sense of what you guys say. So here is just an example, multiplication phrases. So inside of the parentheses, I do have one term or one expression, 4x. So that 4x, first of all, notice we don't have anything in between the 4 and the x. So that means multiplication. By default, when you don't see a plus or minus or anything in between the number and the variable, it means multiplication. So one sentence that represents this expression is multiply 4 by a number. A different sentence is 4 multiplied by a number. And another is the product of 4 and a number. For division, you guys have a fraction, x over 5, or x divided by 5. You guys can say divide a number by 5. And remember that the word number, or the words a number, that means a variable. Usually we use x, but you can use any letter in the alphabet, a P, or you guys can use an M or an S, but you guys need to choose one variable, and that's what's going to represent a number. So this one, you can say divide a number by 5, a number divided by 5, or the quotient of a number and 5. And I'm going to circle that word quotient. Quotient is very, very popular in algebra. So you have to know that quotient means division. You guys will have a fraction just like this one here. So the word quotient means fraction. Another phrase is addition. So we have x plus 2. So you notice the plus in the middle, and you have x, a variable, and this is an expression. So you can say add 2 to a number. So notice how this says add 2 to a number. So number is your variable x. You can also say a number increased by 2. So you guys have x plus 2. You can say 2 more than a number. And let me just circle that word then right here. The word then, remember that you have to switch the order. So look at the expression, x plus 2. Look at this, 2 more than a number. So a number represents x, but the 2, which is at the end of the expression, is first, because the word then switches the actual order. And that's what you have to remember. And the last one is the sum of a number and 2. Sum means addition. And the last type of phrase is subtraction, x minus 3. So you guys have one option, subtract 3 from a number, add a number decreased by 3, 3 less than a number. So one more time, there's the word less than. So then means you have to switch the order. So notice we have x minus 3, but here we have the 3 first, less than a number, and that's going to be a variable. And the last one is the difference between a number and 3. And difference means subtraction. And that's what you guys have to go back and look at the chart that I give you guys with the different words that represent each operation in mathematics. And there's only 4 operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, that you guys need to know. So using all those verbal expressions, using all those words that represent an expression, algebraic expression, let's go ahead and do some examples. Here, we want to write a verbal expression for each algebraic expression. So we have variables, we have exponents, we have terms. So I want to write a sentence that represents this specific algebraic expression. Now guys, there is a few ways, different ways you can write the sentence, but all I'm looking for is for you to make sense of the sentence, and that actually represents the algebraic expression. You might have something different than what I'm going to write here on the video, but if it makes sense and it represents the expression of the algebraic expression, then you are okay. But let's go ahead and look at the first one. So here we do have 3x and we have an exponent of 4. So you can say 3x to the 4th power, 4 means 4th, or you can say 3x to the exponent of 4. So there's a couple ways you can say it, but very important that you understand we do have an exponent and we do have a times multiplication right in the middle. So that means we have to use words that represents multiplication. So going back to those phrases I gave you guys that represents an algebraic expression, I want you guys to put something together that represents and makes sense for this algebraic expression. So one way, one actual word that you guys can use, it is 3 times x to the 4th power. Actually, let me just change this so you know we are multiplying. So I'm just going to put 3 with a dot in the middle, so you guys know, remember that's multiplication. So 3 times x to the 4th power. So one way you guys can write the sentence is the product, and I'm going to underline the word product because product means multiplication. So you can say the product of 3 and now we do have a variable x, so I'm going to use the words a number. So that's what x means. X means a number to the 4th power. So this is one way that you guys can write the sentence for this algebraic expression. Another way that you guys can actually write this down, I'm not going to write it here on the video, but I'm just going to say it. You can say multiply 3 by a number to the 4th power. So instead of using the product, you can say multiply 3. That's the actual number that we have, 3 and by a number to the 4th power. So there's different ways, but I'm just going to show you guys one. And when you guys write the sentence, as long as it makes sense and it represents that algebraic expression, you guys should be good for your answers. Now the next one, we do have 5y squared. So first let's understand the problem. 5y squared plus 16. So here guys, we are multiplying 5 and the y. I'm just going to put a little dot in the middle so you guys know that we are multiplying those two. So remember, multiplication, 5 times y squared, but we're also adding a different number. So on the screen, you can see this option. There's many ways you guys can actually translate this into a verbal expression, but let's go ahead and understand what the sentence means. So we do have the product. So here product means multiplication, and notice that we are multiplying these two terms, the 5 and the y. So we have the product of 5, so there's a number, and a number, so the number represents the y, just a variable, it can be any letter in the alphabet, a number squared, so the squared is already taken care of right here, increase by 16. And let me just underline that word increase, which means you're adding. Increase by 16. There's many other ways you guys can say to add, but increase is just a word that we can use to represent this in a sentence. Now this expression, you really need to understand what it represents. We do have x to the fourth power plus y cubed, or you can say y to the third power. First of all, notice that we do have two different terms, two different variables, one's an x, one's a y, and the two variables have a different exponent. We are adding, so somewhere in our sentence we have to say something that represents addition. So here, one example is the sum. So let me just underline again that word sum, which means you're adding. So we have the sum of a number. So I'm using a number to represent x. So we have a number to the fourth power. So notice fourth means exponent of 4. And I'm just going to underline that again so you guys can understand what fourth power means. So fourth power is your exponent of 4. Now the following is very important because it says here and a second number cubed. Now why am I using second instead of just a number? So let me explain that, but let me just underline the word second number. When we say a number and a second number, that is saying that you have two different numbers, and the two different numbers, they have different variables. They represent different variables. So here, since we have an x and a y, we cannot use the phrase a number twice, because if we say the sum of a number to the fourth power and a number, instead of this, you should say a number cubed, you're talking about the same number. But you have to differentiate that we have two different numbers, two different variables. So that's why I use the word second to say I have a number, so that's the first one, but I'm adding a second different number. So you have to make sense of the problem. You have to know the words that you have to use, the keywords, but this is just one example, and I'm just going to read it again. The sum of a number to the fourth power and a second number cubed. So sum means you're adding those two different numbers and they have different variables. So let's go ahead and try a couple more here. We do have fractions, so we also need to understand how to write the sentence with fractions. So here, the first one is 2r to the fourth power over 9. That's how you just read it, 2r to the fourth power over 9. So first, we know that this fraction line means you're dividing, so that's a division. Up here, the numerator, which is the top of the fraction, we are multiplying two terms. We have 2 times, there's the dot in the middle, r to the fourth power. So we do have a number, and that variable is just the r. And the denominator is just a 9, so we are dividing by 9. One of the words that represents division is quotient, and I'm going to use that word because we are going to use that definition, quotient, which means division, later on and many times in Algebra 1. So you can say divide, division, divided by, that means you actually have a division, but I'm going to use the word quotient so you guys can get used to it. And one example of a verbal expression is the following. So here's the sentence. The quotient of 2 multiplied by a number to the fourth power and 9. So one more time, quotient means fraction, so you are dividing, you have a fraction here, 2r to the fourth power over 9. And on the top of the fraction, you always start by saying what's on the top first. So we have the quotient of what? Well, the top is 2 multiply, so there's the times, multiplied by a number, so a number is your variable, to the fourth power, so that's your exponent, and what goes on the bottom? 9. And here we have a fraction 1 over 7, but we are multiplying, so notice in between the fraction and the variable we have an invisible times. There's no plus, there's no minus, so by default we are multiplying. So we have 1 over 7 times d. So the sentence that represents this expression we can use is the product, so that's times the product of 1/7, and that's the actual fraction, 1 over 7. We say 1/7, and what are you multiplying by? A number. So a number here is your variable d. So this is an example of the sentence. There's other ways you guys can write it, but this is just one sentence that represents that expression. So I'm going to have to do a second video for this section, second part. So I want you guys to also check out that video. And if you guys like my videos, go ahead and hit that like button. You guys can also subscribe so you guys can get my updates for the videos that I make. And I want you guys to practice, and I'll see you guys later.